The night was colder than usual, and the mountains were covered in thick fog. Evan, a lonely traveler, walked carefully along the narrow, rocky path. His clothes were soaked from the freezing wind, and his hands were numb. He needed a warm place before the storm got worse. The sky rumbled with thunder, warning him that he didn't have much time left. Evan pressed his hand on the rough rock wall to balance himself. Every step felt heavier. He searched for shelter somewhere safe where he could rest for a few hours. Then he heard it, a small cry. Soft, weak, almost like a baby's voice. Evan stopped instantly. The sound came again, a gentle chirp, trembling with fear. It echoed between the rocks. It didn't sound human. It didn't sound like any animal he knew. It felt strange, lost, helpless. His heart tightened. He looked around but saw nothing in the darkness. The fog moved like ghosts around him. The cry came again, louder this time, pulling him toward a narrow opening between two giant stones. Evan hesitated. A cave could mean danger. Wild animals, collapsing rocks. Total darkness, but the cry was desperate. Someone or something was suffering inside. He forced himself forward and squeezed through the opening. The cave was dim, glowing faintly with a white light coming from deeper inside. The air was warm, almost comforting. Evan walked slowly, listening carefully. The cry came again, then another, then several at once. He reached a wider space inside the cave and froze in shock. 12 small creatures, huddled together near broken eggshells. Their skin was white like snow. Their eyes glowed red. They had tiny wings, still too weak to open fully. Their tails curled around their bodies as they shook from fear and cold. They were dragon hatchlings. Evan's breath caught in his throat. He couldn't believe it. Dragons were legends, old stories, myths people told around campfires. But these babies were real, and they were terrified. When they saw him, they hissed softly, trying to look dangerous. Oh, but they were too small, too weak, too cold. One of them tried to stand, but fell over. Another hid behind a rock, peeking with wide, frightened eyes. Evan slowly knelt on the ground. He didn't move quickly, kept his hands open to show he meant no harm. "It's okay," he whispered softly. His voice echoed gently across the cave. "I won't hurt you." One brave hatchling, slightly bigger than the rest, took a small step forward. Its claws clicked softly on the stone floor. It stared at Evan for a moment, deciding whether he was a threat or a hope. Then it touched his hand. The moment its tiny claw rested on his skin, the others let out soft chirps. They crawled toward him one by one, gathering around him for warmth. Evan slowly opened his coat. The hatchlings climbed inside, trembling but trusting. Evan felt their small bodies shivering against his chest. They were so light, so fragile, and yet they felt strangely warm. He held them gently, trying to give them as much heat as he could. A loud boom echoed from outside the cave. The entrance shook. Rocks crumbled from the ceiling. The hatchlings hid deeper inside Evan's coat, whimpering softly. Evan's eyes widened. Something outside had caused that. Then he heard it, a roar, so deep it vibrated through the stone walls. Not thunder, not the wind, not anything human. It was a creature. A huge one, and it was coming toward the cave. Evan swallowed hard. He hugged the hatchlings tighter. "Don't worry," he whispered. "I'll protect you." But the roar came again, closer, louder, angrier. The ground shook beneath his feet. Whatever chased the hatchling's mother had returned, and now Evan was trapped with 12 baby dragons in a cave with no way out. The cave grew silent to silent. Even the wind outside seemed to hold its breath. Evan pressed his back against the cold stone wall, holding the tiny dragon hatchlings close beneath his coat. Their small hearts beat fast, like drums trembling against his chest. Their warm breaths touched his skin, but their fear made the air feel freezing. Another roar echoed through the mountain, deep and heavy, shaking dust from the ceiling. The sound didn't just fill the cave, it crawled into Evan's bones. Whatever was out there was huge. The hatchlings whimpered softly, their glowing red eyes staring toward the entrance. They knew the sound. They feared it. Evan tried to control his breathing. "Stay quiet," he whispered. "Stay with me." Then came the footsteps, slow, heavy, each step like a hammer against the earth. The ground trembled under Evan's feet. A shadow grew near the entrance, too large for any normal creature. The rocks around the opening cracked as something pushed against them. A low growl rolled through the cave, a warning, a challenge, a promise of death. The hatchlings buried themselves deeper into Evan's coat. Evan grabbed the only thing he had, sharp rock he had picked up from the ground earlier. It wasn't much. It wasn't even close to a real weapon, but he held it tightly anyway. If something tried to hurt the babies, he would fight. He didn't know why he felt so protective, but he did. Strongly, a giant claw forced itself through the narrow cave opening, scraping the stone. Long, black, twisted. Almost as long as Evan's arm. The claw flexed, cutting deep marks into the rock. Then another claw came through beside it. Evan froze. A shadow beast, a creature from the deepest parts of the mountain's rear, deadly and known for hunting young dragons. Its body was made of darkness and bone, eyes like two burning coals, fur black as night. Its jaws were big enough to crush stone, and it wanted the hatchlings. The beast shoved its head into the opening, growling violently. The cave shook, stones falling from above. The hatchlings cried. Evan stepped in front of them, raising the rock as if it were a real weapon. The beast roared and swung its claw toward him. Evan jumped aside, the claw missing him by inches. It hit the ground, leaving deep cracks in the stone. Evan attacked back. He slammed the rock into the beast's claw. It wasn't strong enough to injure it, but it surprised the beast. It pulled its arm back, shaking the cave entrance. The hatchlings saw Evan fighting alone. Their bodies glowed faintly with tiny sparks of white flame. They were weak, young, and scared, but they wanted to help. One hatchling crawled out of Evan's coat and stood on the ground. Its tiny chest expanded. It inhaled deeply, released a small burst of white fire. The flame hit the beast's face. It wasn't powerful enough to burn it, but it made the monster roar in shock and anger. Now the beast forced itself even harder into the cave. Evan grabbed the hatchling, pulling it away before the beast could reach it. "Stay back," he shouted. "All of you, stay behind me." The beast squeezed halfway inside. Its red eyes locked on Evan and the babies. Saliva dripped from its teeth. It roared again, the sound deafening in the small cave. Evan pressed his back against the hatchlings. He couldn't run. He couldn't escape. There was no other exit. He had to fight. He ran forward and smashed the rock against the beast's eye. The beast screamed and jerked its head back violently. The entire cave shook. Rocks tumbled from above. The entrance cracked wider. The beast pulled out, snarling, leaving a trail of dark blood on the stones. For a moment, everything fell silent again. Then, outside, multiple roars answered the wounded beast. Not one. Not two. A whole pack. Evan felt the hatchlings trembling. He whispered, "We need to get out. Now." But shadows moved outside the cave. The beasts were gathering, and the night was far from over. The outside world growled like a living nightmare. Evan stood inside the cave, breathing fast, listening to the pack of shadow beasts circle the entrance. Their claws scraped the rocks, Their roars shook the snow outside. The hatchlings clung to his legs. Trembling knew one thing. Evan knew one thing. If he stayed, they would all die. He looked at the tiny dragons, their glowing red eyes full of fear. He whispered, "We can't stay here. We need to run." The hatchlings chirped softly, as if trying to ask, "Where? How?" Evan didn't know. The mountains were full of dangers, cliffs, and endless snow. But staying was not an option. He lifted the first two hatchlings and tucked them inside his coat. The others climbed onto his shoulders, his arms, and even the back of his neck. Their tiny claws held on tightly. They trusted him completely. Evan stood, gripping the sharp stone in his hand. The entrance was partially broken from the beast's attack. Cold wind blew in, carrying flakes of snow. He waited for a gap a moment when the beasts were not directly in front of the opening. A roar echoed slightly farther away. "Now," Evan whispered. He rushed out of the cave into freezing darkness. Snow hit his face like icy needles. The world outside was a blur of white wind and black shadows. The shadow beasts turned immediately. Their glowing eyes locked onto him. Their growls ripped through the storm. Evan ran. The snow was deep. Every step felt like wading through water. His boots slipped on the uneven ground. His breath turned into clouds of white steam. The hatchlings chirped and tightened their grip. Trying not to fall, the first beast charged. Evan barely dodged as a massive claw swung through the air, missing his head by inches. Snow exploded around him. He stumbled but didn't fall. He couldn't. 12 tiny lives depended on him. He slid down a snowy slope, losing balance. He hit the ground hard at the bottom. The hatchlings cried out, but none fell off. Behind him, beasts leaped down the slope. Their bodies moved like shadows in the storm. Evan forced himself up and kept running. "Just a little more," he gasped. "Stay with me." Then he saw something through the thick foga narrow gap between two cliffs. A small space, big enough for him and the hatchlings, too tight for the beasts. He sprinted toward it. A beast jumped at him from the side. Evan fell. The stone flew from his hand. The beast's jaws snapped inches from his foot. Evan kicked snow into its face and crawled desperately. The hatchlings used what little fire they had, tiny sparks that flashed like candles to distract the beast. It roared in frustration. Evan reached the cliff gap and squeezed inside. The beasts slammed into the rock walls, unable to enter. Their claws scraped the stone angrily. Their roars shook the narrow path. Evan backed deeper into the gap, his breath shaking. The hatchlings slowly crawled out from his coat and arms. Some were crying. One was trembling uncontrollably. Evan hugged them close. "We made it," he whispered. For now. But they were still deep in the mountains with no safe shelter. Snow fell heavier, covering everything. The temperature dropped. Evan looked up at the sky, which completely dark. The hatchlings suddenly stopped crying. Every small head turned upward at the same time. Evan followed their gaze. Through the snow-filled sky, something enormous moved, dark wings, bigger than a house. A long neck like a silver river. Eyes glowing with ancient fire. A giant white dragon descended through the clouds. The ground trembled when it landed. Snow blasted outward like a storm. Evan shielded the hatchlings with his body. The dragon leaned close. Her breath warm, her presence overwhelming. The hatchlings chirped, loudly calling her. Evan realized the truth. Their mother had returned. But her eyes were not gentle. They were filled with fury, and she was looking directly at him. Snow swirled around them like white smoke as the giant dragon landed. Her wings stretched out so wide they blocked the sky. Her scales shone brighter than moonlight. each one glowing faintly like a piece of living crystal. The ground shook under her weight. Even the shadows hid from her presence. Evan stood frozen, unable to breathe. The hatchlings rushed toward her with excited chirps, but halfway there, they stopped and looked back at him, unsure, scared of what would happen next. The mother's head lowered slowly. Her eyes burning silver locked onto Evan. He felt her gaze like heat pressing into his skin. Not anger, not confusion. Something deeper, older, ancient instinct. The queen stretched her long neck forward. Her nostrils flared as she sniffed the air around him, smelling the hatchling's scent. "And is Dot?" Evan whispered. "I didn't hurt them." His voice was small against the storm. The queen's jaw opened slightly, showing rows of sharp white teeth. A low growl rumbled through the mountains. Snow fell from higher peaks. The beasts hiding in the forest ran away from the sound. The hatchlings chirped loudly, climbing on Evan's legs, arms, and chest as if shouting, "He protected us." The queen's eyes shifted from Evan to the hatchlings. She saw their trust. She saw how they clung to him, hiding in his coat, seeking warmth from him. For a moment, the growl stopped, but only for a moment. The queen suddenly roared, her breath blasting the snow backward in a giant wave. Evan shielded the babies with his body. The roar wasn't anger, was pain. A deep pain, deeper than the mountains themselves. She had lost her eggs. She had fought the beasts alone. She thought her children were gone. Evan finally understood. Her rage wasn't at him. It was at everything that tried to take her babies. The queen lowered her head until her enormous face was inches from Evan. He felt her warm breath. The hatchlings chirped again, all 12 stepping between Evan and the queen as if trying to explain. Evan lifted his hands slowly. "I found them alone," he said softly. Cold, scared. "I didn't know who they belonged to, but I couldn't leave them." The queen's eyes narrowed, glowing brighter. She was reading him. Not with sight, not with sound, but with something older. Something like dragon instinct. Then something happened Evan did not expect. The queen lightly touched his chest with her nose. A warm pulse spread through him. The hatchlings went silent. The snow stopped falling. Even the wind paused. A voice entered Evan's mind, not spoken, not heard, but felt human. "Why did you risk your life for them?" Evan swallowed. "Because they were helpless. Because they needed someone. Because no child should die alone." The queen blinked slowly. The glow in her eyes softened just a little. Dragons were ancient, powerful, feared across the worlds, but they valued one thing above all: those who protected their young. Asterisk, not two. A whole pack, drawn by the smell of hatchlings and their mother's return. Dozens of red eyes appeared in the darkness. The queen turned sharply, her wings lifting with fury. Her growl shook the sky. Flames formed in her throat. Like a star ready to explode, Evan grabbed the hatchlings again. The beasts charged. Snow flew everywhere as the pack ran forward. The queen roared in fury, unleashing a stream of white fire so bright it lit the entire valley. But there were too many beasts. The pack split, some going for the queen, some going for Evan and the babies. Evan shouted, "Get behind me." The ground cracked. The night roared. The beasts drew closer, and for the first time, the queen looked back at Evan not with rage, but with fear. Fear that she might lose her children again. The night exploded into chaos. The first shadow beast leaped forward. Claws stretched wide, jaws opened to bite. Evan barely had time to pull two hatchlings close before the queen slammed her tail into the beast, sending it crashing into a tree with a thunderous crack. But she was only one dragon, and the beasts came from every direction. Evan took a step back as three beasts circled him, growling and baring their teeth. Their red eyes glowed in the snowstorm. The hatchlings pressed against his legs, crying. He grabbed a long piece of broken wood from the ground, sharp on one end, heavy on the other. Not much, but better than nothing. A beast charged then turned sideways, avoiding the first swipe of its claws. The snow beneath his feet slid, almost making him fall, but he kept his balance. He swung the wooden spear with all his strength. The point struck the beast's nose. It howled and stumbled back, shaking its head furiously. Behind him, another hatchling released a tiny burst of white flame. It was small and weak, but enough to keep one beast from jumping at them. Evan shouted, "Stay behind me. Stay low." The queen roared, unleashing a river of blazing white fire. The flames lit the entire valley like a second sun. Dozens of beasts screamed, their dark bodies twisting as they ran through the snow to escape her wrath. But the beasts were fast, and the pack was larger than she expected. One beast jumped onto her back, biting into her wing. She shrieked in pain, shaking her entire body. Snow and smoke flew everywhere. Another beast lunged for her neck. Evan didn't think. He ran. He jumped onto a fallen rock, raised the wooden spear, and threw it with all the strength he had. The spear struck the beast's eye. The creature roared, falling off the queen's back. The queen turned her head sharply, looking at Evan, again surprised. And something else. Something like approval. But there was no time to understand it. A massive beast crashed into Evan from the side, sending him sliding across the snow. He hit the ground hard, pain shooting through his ribs. The hatchlings screamed and ran after him. The beast towered over Evan, snarling, dripping black saliva. Its claws rose high. Evan rolled just as the claws slammed into the ground, cracking the frozen earth. He grabbed a rock and smashed it into the beast's jaw. The monster roared and struck again. Evan dodged, but not fast enough, but squalls scraped across his arm. Slicing fabric and skin, blood spilled into the snow. The hatchlings panicked. Then something incredible happened. All 12 lined up in front of Evan. Their bodies shook. Their tiny chests expanded. Their eyes glowed brighter than ever, and together, they breathed white fire, a combined stream small but powerful enough to hit the beast directly in the face. The beast stumbled back, roaring in pain. Its fur burned with blue-white flames. It ran in circles, trying to extinguish the fire before collapsing into the snow. The hatchlings cried out, then rushed back to Evan, nuzzling him, chirping desperately as if asking, "Are you hurt? Are you okay?" Evan smiled weakly. "I'm fine, thanks to you." The queen roared again, sending fire in every direction. Only 3 beasts remained now. They hesitated, unsure if they could defeat a giant dragon. 12 flame-breathing hatchlings, and a human who refused to fall. One beast charged Evan again, before he could move. The queen's massive claws slammed down in front of him, blocking the attack. Snow blasted upward. The beast yelped and tried to escape, but the queen grabbed it with her jaws and threw it into the darkness. The last 2 beasts fled into the forest. Silence finally returned. Evan collapsed onto his knees, breathing hard. The hatchlings surrounded him, chirping softly, their warm bodies pressing against him. The queen lowered her head to Evan's level. Her eyes glowed, not with fury, but with a deep, ancient respect. For a long moment, they simply stared at each other. No words, no fire. Just understanding, and the queen knew this human was no ordinary outsider. He was the protector of her children. The snow settled gently. The flames dimmed, and the mountains waited for what would happen next. Snowflakes drifted softly through the air as the battle smoke faded. The valley grew quiet again, too quiet. Evan sat on the cold ground, breathing heavily, holding one injured hatchling close. Its tiny body trembled, its tail weakly curling around his wrist. The queen watched him silently, her giant wings folded back. Her glowing eyes softened. She lowered her head closer and studied him not with anger, not with suspicion, but with something deeper. Something ancient. Before she could react, a roar thundered from behind the cliffs. The shadow beasts were back, not one. Asterisk. Her giant wings folded back. Her glowing eyes softened. She lowered her head closer and studied him not with anger, not with suspicion, but with something deeper. Something ancient. Her giant wings folded back. Her glowing eyes softened. She lowered her head closer and studied him not with anger, not with suspicion, but with something deeper. Something ancient. Evan gently pressed his hand on the wounded hatchling's side. "Stay with me," he whispered. "I won't let anything happen to you." The little dragon chirped weakly, its fire dim. The queen slowly moved her head toward them. Evan did not run. He did not hide. He simply looked back at her, tired and bleeding, but refusing to let go of the baby dragon. The queen blinked once. Long, slow, almost like a mother seeing something she never expected. Then she lifted her head to the sky and unleashed a low, humming call. It wasn't a roar. It wasn't fire. It was a sound filled with warmth, sadness, and something older than the mountain. The sky answered. Dozens of white sparks appeared above them. Tiny floating lights drifted down through the darkness like glowing snow. The hatchlings chirped softly. Recognizing it instantly, Evan didn't. The queen looked at him as if giving a silent command. She crouched down, inviting him to climb onto her back. Evan hesitated. A human riding a dragon was impossible. Dangerous, insane. But the queen's posture didn't change. Her giant wings were folded still. Carefully waiting for him, the hatchlings nudged him gently, as if saying, "Go, trust her." Evan swallowed and climbed onto her back, holding the hatchlings close. Her scales were smooth, warm like heated stone. The queen lifted her head and spread her massive wings. With a powerful leap, she rose into the sky. Snow blew away from her like waves under a ship. Evan held tightly, breath caught in his chest. The world below shrank, the valley, the trees, the mountains. The queen flew toward a narrow canyon between two peaks. At the center of the mountain range was a hidden loom, entrance glowing with soft white light. She entered. Inside was a cavern unlike anything Evan had ever seen. The walls sparkled with ancient dragon runes. The air was warm and shimmering. Streams of glowing water flowed gently across the floor. The light wasn't from torches, it came from living crystals that pulsed like beating hearts. This was not just a cave, it was a sacred place. The queen lowered herself, so Evan could slide down. He approached the glowing pool. The injured hatchling weakly lifted its head. The queen gently breathed over the water. The pool brightened, glowing white like a newborn star. She looked at Evan Dutsy. He understood. He placed the hatchling into the glowing water the moment its body touched the surface. The water lit up, bursting into swirling rings of white flame. The hatchling cried out not in pain, but in release. Ancient power flowed through the pool. Light rose around them, dancing like soft fire. Then something impossible happened. Evan felt heat on his hands. He looked down, his palms were glowing. The pool recognized him. The flame didn't burn him. Instead, it responded to him as if he were part of it. The queen's eyes widened. Dragons had touched sacred fire for thousands of years, but a human never had. Never. Survived it, never awakened it. She lowered her head and spoke into his mind again. Human, you are not ordinary. You carry the heart of a guardian. Evan stepped back, confused, overwhelmed. I don't understand. The queen circled him slowly, respectfully, her long tail glowing at the tip. Tonight, her voice echoed softly. You proved your spirit. You saved what is most precious to us. She looked at the hatchlings gathering around him, chirping happily now that the injured one was healing. At dawn, a choice will be made. A choice. Before Evan could ask, the queen lay down, surrounding him with her wings like shelter. The hatchlings curled around him, their warm bodies glowing faintly. He closed his eyes. The ancient cavern hummed with soft, living light, and far above, the night waited for dawn. The first light of dawn touched the mountains like a soft, golden breath. The sacred cavern glowed brighter as the sun climbed the sky. Evan slowly opened his eyes, feeling warm bodies pressed against him. The hatchlings slept peacefully around his chest and legs, their tiny breaths glowing faintly in the dim light. For the first time in days, there was silence. No roars, no beasts, no fear. No fear, just peace. The queen stood at the edge of the cavern, watching the rising sun. Her snow-white wings shimmered like glass touched by morning fire. When she noticed Evan waking, she turned her head slightly, her eyes softer than before. You protected them. Her voice echoed gently in his mind. And they trust you. Evan sat up slowly. I just did what anyone would do. No, the queen answered. Not anyone. Only a guardian. Before Evan could speak, the cavern began to vibrate softly like a heartbeat spreading through the mountain. The crystals on the walls brightened. Streams of glowing water pulsed. A new sound filled the air. Flapping wings, hundreds of them. The queen stepped aside, signaling Evan to follow. He stood up, holding 2 hatchlings while the others climbed onto him like they always did, one on each shoulder. Some on his arms, 2 inside his jacket. He walked to the cavern mouth and froze. The sky outside was filled with dragons. White dragons, hundreds of them, young, old, massive. An ancient their wings turned the sky into a shimmering silver ocean. Their roars echoed like thunder rolling through heaven. Evan's breath caught. They're all here. The queen stepped forward and spread her wings wide. Her voice rumbled through every dragon, every stone, every inch of air. Children of the white flame. Gather. The dragons slowly descended, forming a circle around the sacred mountain ledge. Snow blew around them like falling stars. Their glowing eyes locked onto Evan, studying him, judging him, whispering among themselves in deep, rumbling tones. Evan felt so small, just a human in old clothes. Bleeding, tired, unsure why he was standing here. The queen lowered her head and spoke loudly. This human risked his life to protect our future. Murmurs shook the circle. He fought our enemies with courage. The dragons rumbled again. He carried our children. Warmed them, fed them, saved them. The hatchlings chirped proudly on his shoulders. He faced fear without running. And he carries the heart of a guardian. A shining silence fell over the valley. The queen looked at Evanot with dominance. But with respect, then she bowed. Her massive head touched the snow. Hundreds of dragons gasped. Then, one by one, they bowed too. The entire mountain bent toward Evan, wings folding, heads lowered. Evan stood frozen, stunned, overwhelmed. Please, you don't have to do that, he whispered. But the queen's voice rose again. You protected our flame. Now, we protect you. She reached into the glowing pool beside her, lifting a sphere of white fire. The flame hovered above her claw, living and breathing like a small sun. Evan stepped back. I can't take that. The queen gently touched his forehead with the flame. It wrapped around him, not burning, warming. His wounds glowed and began to heal. His torn clothes stitched themselves with light. His heartbeat grew stronger, steadier. The fire curled into a crown above his head. A crown made of pure white flame. Every dragon lifted its head at the same moment. The queen's voice shook. The mountains, by ancient right, by sacred flame, and by the courage of his heart, Evan, protector of hatchlings, is now king of the white dragons. The dragons roared in unison, wings beating the sky. Snow spiraled upward like silver smoke. Light burst across the valley. The hatchlings climbed up his arms and shoulders, chirping loudly, proud and happy. Evan looked at them, then at the queen, tears forming in his eyes. He whispered, "I'm no king. I'm just someone who cared." The queen lowered her head beside him. "That," she said, "is why you are worthy." And as the sun rose higher, thousands of dragons circled above, honoring the human who saved their future, a human king of dragons.